So yesterday, April 14th, we caught that interview with Arthur Mensch, the co-founder CEO of Mistral AI. He's only 32.
Yeah, quite impressive. And Mistral AI, this French, European company.
Right. And their chatbot, LeChat. It really feels like they're gearing up to be a serious competitor to like ChatGPT and the others.
Absolutely. They've pulled in over €1 billion in funding, which is significant, and Time magazine flagged Mensch as a top innovator.
So what we want to do in this deep dive is basically pull out the key stuff from that interview for everyone listening. What's the real impact of AI, according to him? How does Mistral actually work?
And that whole European sovereignty angle, why that matters. We want to just distill it down, get the essentials out quickly.
Okay, so let's start with how Mensch himself uses AI, like day to day.
Well, it sounds pretty integrated, actually, both professionally and personally. He mentioned using it to process information from client calls, emails.
To actually generate suggestions.
Yeah, like concrete suggestions for next steps. He framed it as a real productivity tool right there.
And it wasn't just for those sort of immediate tasks, was it? He mentioned higher level stuff too.
Exactly. Things like preparing product strategy, using LeChat almost like a brainstorming partner. He really emphasized its connection to the web.
So it's not just spitting back info, it's actively researching, interacting.
And then he brought it down to everyday things, too. Planning weekend stuff with his daughter, finding restaurants for visitors.
Which highlights the web connectivity again, right?
What?
Accessing real-time info.
Totally. That seemed key, its ability to tap into current web data and then build an actual plan from it. He even sort of hinted future versions could handle even more complex info gathering across multiple steps.
He also talked about how much AI capabilities have jumped recently. What were the main developments he highlighted?
I think the big one was connecting these models directly to the live web. That's a game changer. It's not just a static knowledge base anymore.
It becomes an orchestrator. Is the term he used?
Yeah, an orchestrator. Actively going out, retrieving info from, he said, maybe 5 to 10 websites for just one query. That's a massive leap.
From library to researcher, basically.
Precisely. And he also mentioned the speed increase, plus the model's ability to sort of think longer, to reason more deeply, and produce complex outputs like reports.
He really made it sound like a huge difference compared to just a year ago.
Definitely. The pace is just incredible.
Okay, so it's powerful. Let's try and break it down a bit. How does this generative AI actually work?
Right. Let's simplify it. You know the text suggestions on your phone keyboard?
Yeah, predicting the next word.
It's fundamentally like that, but just massively scaled up. These models are trained on enormous amounts of text, code, all human knowledge, basically. Their core job is predicting the next word, statistically.
Learning patterns from this giant data set.
Exactly. Now, the leap to navigating the web, that happens when the model, instead of just generating the next word of text, generates instructions like commands for a web browser.
Okay. So it tells the browser what to do.
Yeah, go search this, extract this info from this page. Then it takes all that retrieved content and synthesizes it to answer your question, considering the context.
Like his example, finding vegetarian restaurants in a specific Paris district.
Perfect example. It understands the user's intent, vegetarian, 10th arrondissement, interacts with the web, gets the info, and gives a tailored answer. It's moved way beyond just basic text generation.
Okay, the big question then. Jobs. What's the impact going to be? Are robots taking over?
He addressed that, of course. It's the question everyone asks. He drew parallels to, smartphones, the internet, PCs, saying adapting to tech is just something we do generation after generation.
He used the term co-adaptation, didn't he? Learning to work with the AI.
Yeah, exactly. Co-adaptation. But he did specify certain roles are already seeing changes.
Which ones?
Roles heavy on analysis and research. Think financial decisions, writing investment memos, prepping for client meetings. The speed and access AI offers is changing how those jobs are done.
But he also stressed where humans still have the edge.
Definitely. Human contact, especially in things like sales and genuine creativity, like coming up with truly new ideas, not just synthesizing existing ones.
What about that concern that everything becomes homogenous if we all use the same AI for, say, restaurant recommendations?
That's a fair point. But his counter was that the AI's output really depends on the input quality. The more specific and nuanced your prompt,
the more personalized the results.
Precisely. And that applies way beyond restaurants' creative writing strategy, anything. Garbage in, garbage out still applies, maybe even more so.
Okay, good point. So what can't these advanced AIs do well right now? What are the limits?
Well, even the best models still struggle with managing like really large amounts of information simultaneously,
Hmm.
or juggling lots of different tools effectively.
And creativity is still limited.
Yeah, true originality without very specific human guidance is tough. And mathematical discovery, inventing new theorems, not just solving known problems, that's still a major challenge.
And their way of reasoning isn't quite human.
Right. He mentioned differences, especially in spatial reasoning or understanding the physical world, like how gears mesh together. That kind of intuitive physics is hard for them.
And crucially, they only know what they've been trained on.
Exactly. No magic. If it wasn't in the training data, they fundamentally don't know it.
Let's pivot to Mistral AI specifically. What did he say about their approach to data and future development?
He really stressed the importance of specialized data. For example, feeding their models specific French legal texts to make them better at legal tasks in France.
So tailoring the data for specific domains.
Uh-huh. And as the models get more capable, he said the need for more data and more specialized data just keeps growing. You need better fuel for a bigger engine.
And how are they making this a business? What's the model?
It's multifaceted. LeChat is out there for individuals, sure, and it's a great showcase.
But the core business is elsewhere.
Yeah, the core seems focused on working with companies, deploying customized AI solutions inside those companies, internal chatbots, specific apps for logistics, industry, whatever they need.
Plus a developer platform.
Right, letting others build industry-specific products on top of Mistral's models. So it's a strong B2B focus initially, but they clearly see the value in the public-facing side too.
He sees AI becoming like ubiquitous.
Pretty much. A horizontal technology used at home, used at work, like spreadsheets or browsers today. But he did differentiate the consumer LeChat from the enterprise versions.
How so?
Same basic interface, but different backends. Consumer connects to the web. Enterprise connects to a company's internal secure knowledge sources. Different data, different personalization.
Okay, let's talk bias. It's a huge issue. How does Mistral handle the fact that AI learns from potentially biased human data?
He broke down their training into two phases. First is knowledge compression, just hoovering up data, which inevitably includes existing societal biases.
Right, it learns what's there, warts and all.
Exactly. But then comes the second phase, editorial steering. This is where they actively guide the model on how to respond to sensitive topics, politics, history, medicine.
So they're making conscious choices.
Absolutely. They can steer it to be more cautious with medical advice, for example, or to try and present balanced views on political issues. It's an editorial process.
He basically said there's no such thing as a truly unbiased model.
Yeah, he was clear on that. Every deployment involves editorial choices. Mistral's approach is to help companies personalize these choices for their specific contexts and values.
Contrasting with maybe other approaches like Elon Musk's Grok or AI from China.
Right. He mentioned those as having different editorial slants. Mistral started more hands-off, but now they use evaluation data sets, user feedback, aiming for minimal bias from their side, and presenting multiple viewpoints where things are ambiguous.
This leads right into the bigger political picture. He called AI the new generation of media, potentially more influential than social media. That's significant.
It really is. The core worry is about control. A few massive, mostly American companies potentially controlling the information flow for everyone.
Raising questions about cultural sovereignty and economic dependence.
Both. Imagine subtle biases consistently shaping answers on cultural or political topics. Over time, that could have a real impact. It's not just about the tech, it's who wields it.
So education and critical thinking become even more vital.
Absolutely. And he argued for national strategies around AI sovereignty, ensuring there are alternatives and some level of control.
What about regulation then? How does Mistral fit into that debate?
He acknowledged it's happening, of course. Mistral's stance, linked to their open source model, is to aim for neutrality in their base models.
How does open source help with neutrality?
By releasing the models themselves, the parameters, the weights openly, they allow others to take those models and apply their own editorial biases or safety layers. It decentralizes that editorial control rather than Mistral dictating it for everyone.
Okay, explain the open source part more. What exactly is open?
So a chunk of their core IP, the trained models, are available as files. People can download them, run them, modify them. They also provide open source software tools to help use these models.
But not everything is open.
No, it's what's often called open core. Things like their specific deployment infrastructure, the systems connecting models to data sources, their enterprise solutions, the fancy user interfaces. That stuff is generally proprietary.
What's the upside of open source for Mistral? Why give away core tech?
Several reasons. It boosts distribution, gets their models out there fast. It accelerates research because the global community can build on it and even find improvements.
Kind of mutualizing R&D costs.
Exactly. And it fosters a collaborative ecosystem, which he contrasted with more closed players like OpenAI. He argued open source has always driven AI forward, and Mistral's is committed to being a leader in that. And their open models are genuinely competitive now.
So compared to competitors like OpenAI or Google, what are Mistral's unique selling points?
One big one is that portable platform we mentioned, deploy anywhere. That flexibility for data governance is key for many businesses.
Different editorial choices in the models themselves, too.
Right. And a big focus on efficiency, making smaller, faster models that still perform really well. They're pushing the industry that way, partly by giving away efficient models for free.
Plus more customization and support.
Yeah, more support for bespoke deployments. And he highlighted access to the strong European talent pool, engineers, scientists, business folks. They're actively hiring.
What about the challenges specifically for Europe in this AI race?
He mentioned a couple things. One is that European companies can sometimes be slower to adopt cutting-edge tech compared to U.S. firms.
Market fragmentation, too.
Yeah, dealing with 27 different countries, business cultures, regulations that make scaling harder than in a unified market like the U.S. And even things like talent mobility, longer notice periods, and contracts can slow down rapid hiring needed for growth.
Interesting. He also mentioned China, specifically DeepSeek. How do they compare?
He described DeepSeek as quite similar to Mistral in structure, young, ambitious, also releasing models openly. He even noted some of their recent work built on Mistral's foundations.
So a shared DNA of openness and efficiency.
Seems like it. Both are kind of proving you don't necessarily need the absolute billions some others have raised to train highly competitive models, although Mistral has raised substantial funds itself.
This relates to what he said about scaling laws and maybe hitting a data limit.
Right. The idea was just add more compute, more data, get better models. That's the scaling law. But he thinks we might be nearing saturation for the easily available general web data, maybe around 20 trillion words.
So throwing more computers at it won't help as much soon.
Potentially. Progress will increasingly depend on better data quality, new training techniques, and crucially, specializing models using niche, high-quality data from specific industries' knowledge that's currently siloed.
He brought up AlphaGo, the Go-playing AI, as an example of AI actually generating new knowledge. How did that work?
AlphaGo is fascinating. It learned, go through reinforcement learning, basically. It just got rewarded for winning games. By playing itself millions of times, it discovered strategies humans had never conceived of.
So the reward signal drove discovery.
Exactly. And they're trying to apply that now to text domains, like maths, rewarding the AI for logically sound reasoning steps or finding valid proofs.
Could that work for something like philosophy?
That's much harder. What's the reward for a groundbreaking philosophical insight? It's not as clear-cut as winning a game or proving a theorem, much more challenging in open-ended domains.
Shifting to a more personal note, what were Mensch's own biggest fears about AI?
His number one seemed to be centralized control. He really emphasized the danger of this tech being held by just a few entities, hence his push for decentralization and open models.
Any other concerns?
He worried about subtle cultural influence and manipulation. Because these AIs can be designed to create empathy, seem relatable, that could be exploited, especially tied to monetization.
Which brings us back to needing critical thinking skills.
Absolutely. Being aware of potential influence campaigns, especially in democracies. He did dismiss the whole Terminator AI takeover scenario as sci-fi, though. It's software ultimately controlled by humans.
But he did mention a risk of deskilling.
Yes. The danger that we rely too much on AI and lose our own abilities. He stressed the importance of designing AI tools that augment us but keep us engaged and thinking, not just making us passive.
And education. Big implications there.
Huge. He sees potential for AI as a personalized tutor, helping teachers. But the obvious risk is students just using it to cheat, to do the work for them without learning. Big challenge for educators.
Another common concern, energy consumption. AI needs massive data centers.
He acknowledged that, yes, demand is growing. But he contextualized it. AI's current energy footprint is still relatively small compared to many other industries, though it is increasing.
And Mistral is doing things to mitigate that.
Yeah, trying to locate compute in Europe, especially France, leveraging the lower carbon nuclear energy mix there. They've done a carbon audit. And again, making models more efficient directly reduces energy use per task.
He even had an optimistic take.
Kind of.
Yeah.
That the demand from AI could actually spur more investment in renewables and nuclear. But the key takeaway was it's twofold. Make the AI efficient and power it with clean energy.
Okay, last question. Looking ahead, say 2 or 3 years, what did he predict for AI generally and Mistral specifically?
He expects the science to keep accelerating better reasoning, more controllability in models. For LeChat, expect improvements, new connections, better UX, and those enterprise versions really boosting productivity.
And for Mistral, the company?
Strong commercial growth, especially in Europe and Asia, driven by that desire for alternatives and sovereignty, but also growth in the US, potentially through partnerships.
So managing growth, improving the product, pushing the science.
Exactly. Reasoning, coding, multimodal AI. And he noted ongoing challenges too, like really nailing personalization and giving customers easy ways to implement their own editorial controls.
Well, that was certainly a thorough deep dive into our discussion on Arthur Mensch and Mistral AI. It really paints a picture of a dynamic company with a clear, perhaps different, vision for AI's future.
Absolutely. We touched on their tech, their business strategy, the big ethical questions around bias and control, and that core commitment to open source. Lots to think about.
The podcast's title is Le Podcast de Philippe. And hey, if you found this breakdown useful and want us to keep doing these deep dives, we really need your help over on YouTube, trying to hit 1,000 subscribers today.